Hey, what's up guys? My name is Sal and this is another expedition log. As we wind down the ExLog Phase 4 epoch, gearing up for Phase 5, our journey takes us further up north to an effervescent dead mall, dripping in turquoise and contrasted by warm pastels. We'll be seeing this place first as it was during the 2020 holiday season, and then 6 months later in June of 2021. As always, I hope all of you are out there living your best lives now that the world is opening back up to a bit of normalcy. Also, it's worth mentioning that just 9% of those of you subscribed to me have notifications turned on. So please take a moment and make sure you're both subscribed to my channel and that you rang the bell with notifications set to all. Today, I'd like you to come take a walk with me through what I consider to be Crown American's Turquoise Admiral, the Uniontown Mall. But first, a quick word from our sponsor. Safety seen through the eyes of the 90s. Enjoy.
On the Intergalactia Expressway, the drivers of two commuter autobuses. My nightly near-miss report is very popular. People smartened up and realized that if we paid more attention to the near misses, we could prevent accidents. Let's see how they do it. The bulk of it is lurking below the surface.
Watch out! Greg, didn't you see me? You almost ran me over.
Waiting to sabotage any ships that get too close.
No, she was jumping out of the way.
So you couldn't see her when you came around the corner?
Right.
But it was at the end of the aisle. Why didn't you stop and sound the horn before you turned?
Jose, stop! There's acetone in that container. You can't pour that down the drain.
And Jose, if you didn't know what was in that container, what made you so sure that it was safe to pour it down the drain?
When a near-miss incident is investigated like an accident, the causes are identified and steps are taken to prevent it from happening again.
That was close. It almost took my finger off. The investigation proved to me that I was wrong.
If you have a near-miss incident, remember to treat it seriously and report it.
Welcome to the Uniontown Mall during the holiday season of 2020. Before we jump into the history of this legendary Crown American Mall, I wanted to first lay out what you'll be seeing in this episode so there's no confusion. The footage you're seeing right now was shot on December 5th, 2020. Not only were we in the throes of a global pandemic at this point, but also the peak of the holiday shopping season. So you'll notice two things here. First, you'll see about a 50-50 split in mask usage. And secondly, you'll see an artificially busy center concourse. Around this time, I noticed malls began forming waiting queues outside the storefronts as capacity limits were implemented. But the center concourse at this mall was absolutely packed, and I felt pretty uncomfortable being around so many people, especially because vaccines weren't a thing at this point, and there were a ton of folks just not masking up. So we'll quickly traverse the center of the mall, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Overall, the holiday season can provide a short-term boost in sales for the gray ghosts and dying rural malls such as Uniontown. But the trouble comes in after the holidays, when malls aren't charmed with the traffic that surrounds shopping holidays. But as you can see here, this mall is absolutely packed. People were just everywhere. So we got to the other side of the mall a bit quicker than usual. And the trip that I had here was a little bit frantic, because security was all over the place, and the people were just a little bit too close for comfort. But the point is that even though there's an artificial amount of business in the center of the mall, mostly with the Bath & Body Works, it doesn't truly represent the occupancy at this mall. Just like the footage you'll see in a few minutes where the mall is closing for the day, that doesn't truly represent the actual occupancy. So I wanted to show the dichotomy between a packed center concourse and a completely empty center concourse. But with those disclaimers out of the way, let's talk about the history of the Uniontown Mall as we continue the video tour. By January 19th, 1972, Frank J. Pasquarilla's Crown Construction Company was building their 10th mall in Uniontown, Pennsylvania.
Have you seen the boozy chocolates?
This is nuts.
While most of the mall was still under construction, the first senior anchor would open on Monday, July 31st, 1972, when fancy ribbons were cut on an impressively sized GB department store. This $3 million anchor included a 72,000 square foot main GB store, a 20,000 square foot food market, and a 22,000 square foot furniture mart. GB was a subsidiary and discount chain below the Glosser Brothers umbrella, and it offered a wide range of discount goods among their various snack bars and amenities. Along with the GB, Uniontown Mall had 10 inline tenants open, pushing the mall to a soft launch. The newly opened tenants included Hanover Shoes, Fashion Bug, National Record Mart, Robert Hall Clothes, and an Orange Julius. With the GB courtyard open, the Uniontown Mall celebrated its $10 million Phase 1 grand opening. By Monday, October 30th, later that year, Frank Pasquarella announced that his company would be changing its name. He said, quote, "We've grown out of our name. The word construction no longer describes what we do, and therefore, we're changing our name to Crown American Corp. To fit our bigger purpose," close quote. Obviously, they'd go on to build other legendary malls like Schuylkill, Phillipsburg, and Chambersburg, and make sure to go check out my videos on those 3 malls, by the way, which you can find in ExLogs 9, 10, 21, 25, and 32. They're also in the main Expedition Log series playlist, which you can find on my channel's main page. But Crown American wanted to focus on the fact that they developed their own malls, and they were no longer a simple masonry contracting firm as they were in 1950 at their inception. They also had an eventual IPO in mind, with massive plans for the future, so the name change made plenty of sense. And I just couldn't help myself but to lay on the floor and show you guys the ceiling. The riveting content never stops on the Expedition Log series. Anyway, the second senior anchor would open at the mall with Sears Roebuck & Company, cutting their ribbon on Monday, February 26, 1973. This 80,000 square foot anchor also included an auto department that sold tires, batteries, and accessories for cars. Accompanying the Sears, in its concourse were a Lum's restaurant and a McCrory's 5 and Dime. The Mano's Twin 40 1 and 2 Theater opened on May 23rd with Class of 44 and Peter O'Toole's Man of La Mancha as the first movies shown. Along with the Sears, GB, theater, and various inline tenants opening through the year, Uniontown would be fully operational, and it would celebrate its $5 million Phase 2 dedication on Saturday, October 13, 1973. The mall spanned a total of 850 feet and encompassed over 550,000 square feet of retail space at its Phase 2 opening. At the time, it was one long concourse from the Sears to GB. But the mall lacked fenestration and had no natural lighting, which was made painfully obvious by the drop ceiling with mineral fiber tiles that may or may not have been laced with asbestos. White terrazzo tiles lined the floor, and 3 fountains were situated along the concourse with decorated lighting features for extra flair. Precast concrete planters had redwood benches attached with fiberglass seating around the fountains, providing the only color throughout the mall at the time, showcasing red, yellow, and blue paint. The mall was relatively bland when it first opened, and it certainly didn't have the colors that adorn its halls that we see today. On Wednesday, July 28, 1976, a Bon-Ton opened as the 3rd senior anchor at the Uniontown Mall. And with a constant eye on the future, Crown American bought the entire Hess's department store chain in 1979. Into the 1980s, the mall was thriving, and with the concourses and stores packed every weekend, Crown American was keen to expand and seek out new tenants. By July of 1983, a modest $5.1 million expansion commenced at Uniontown, which took about 7 months to complete. On March 1st of 1984, a new 65,000 square foot Hess's department store had its grand opening, along with a 60,000 square foot concourse connecting it directly to the Sears courtyard. Now with 4 senior anchors and at over 620,000 square feet of space, Uniontown Mall had an incredible head of steam as it traipsed through the late 1980s. To bring us to the second half of this episode, I'd like to jump forward in time 6 months and to set the mood right with some beautiful new drone footage. Uniontown Mall is a fantastic example of a classic Crown American mall that retained its composure throughout the years. However, up until this point, I've only described it as a colorless suburban mall with very little to discern it from any other suburban gray ghost. As I've stated in previous episodes, Most suburban malls up until this point in history were much darker than they were today. But Uniontown Mall was also doing wonderfully by the late 1980s. Frank Pasquarilla's Crown American was also at the height of its business at this time. They owned 27 malls across 8 states, covering millions of square feet of retail, and their reputation spanning nearly 40 years of operation couldn't have been stronger. But while malls such as Uniontown would go on to thrive well into the 2010s, Crown American would face their own hardships through the years, coming down from their peak in the late 80s and into the trough through the 1990s. Despite the developer's impending fall from grace, at least with Uniontown they had a keen eye on the future and knew that some color and light were needed to let it stand out amongst its sparse competition. In the late 1980s, Crown American announced an incredible redevelopment for Uniontown that would radically transform its drab appearance, along with bringing new life to an existing tenant and bringing on a 5th senior anchor. Work would take over a year and a half to complete, as they shuffled shoppers around construction so as not to interrupt too much of the ongoing business. But in the middle of construction, the GB chain was forced into Chapter 11 bankruptcy as they were being squeezed out by competing retailers such as Kmart and Dayton Hudson's discount division, Target. The work on Uniontown went on with no delay and would be completed by December 16, 1990, when the mall had its grand rededication ceremony. The old GB store was completely razed, and a new building was constructed for the anchor, which it did occupy, if just for a brief time. This new GB was connected to a brand new concourse that led to the mall's 5th anchor, a JCPenney. But the biggest changes were seen throughout the concourses and courtyards of the mall. Gone were the hideous drop ceilings, which were now littered with skylights and a bold turquoise, which made the mall appear much larger. The mall actually was larger after this expansion, now at over 700,000 square feet. All the fountains were removed, and the lighting was updated. Overall, the mall had an impressive new aesthetic, one that showed confidence and forward thinking. Crown American's Turquoise Admiral in Uniontown was staged for incredible success with 5 anchors, a newly twinned 4-screen theater, and a new food court next to GB, brilliant visuals throughout, and a strong developer behind it all. By the summer of 1991, GB had successfully exited bankruptcy after restructuring, but the company was immediately put up for sale, most likely to avoid a liquidation in Chapter 7. By April 16, 1992, Value City had announced the purchase of GB for $23.1 million, and the store at Uniontown Mall was converted to a Value City by 1993. Shortly after the Value City conversion, the Manos Twin 40 Theater was converted to a Carmike Cinema when they absorbed the theater, and by August of 1995, the cinema had been reconfigured and renovated to the Carmike 6-screen theater. 1993 was a big year for Crown American as a company, too. They decided to split their hotel business from the malls, and they took the malls public in August of '93 as Crown American Realty Trust, which was a real estate investment trust, or REIT. Their opening stock price in '93 was $17.25, so keep that in the back of your mind. The IPO raised over $410 million for the company, and things seemingly looked okay. The stock offering was underwritten by Boston, Massachusetts-based security firm Kidder, Peabody & Co., which served under General Electric. Crown American's IPO would inspire other developers to go public, such as Herbert and Melvin Simon, Eddie DeBartolo, and Alfred Taubman, who would take their malls public in the years to follow. While the GE subsidiary was going through their own internal investigations for fraud, things weren't looking good for Crown American. It was discovered shortly after their IPO that they grossly overstated their revenue projections by about $1.2 million, which caused investors to become suspicious right out of the gate. Adding to the rough IPO, 15 of Crown American's best malls were tied up in a $300 million securitized mortgage pool, which analysts called a, quote, financial straitjacket, close quote, that prevented Crown from securing enough working capital. This wasn't good, because at the time, the Crown American-owned Hess's chain also wasn't doing too hot, and they happened to anchor a number of Crown's malls, which created a big conflict of interest. To make matters worse, in 1993, it was disclosed that Frank Pasquarella had undergone heart surgery, and the company had no successor in place, further castigating the company, miring its image in the eyes of new investors.
So when I first came to Uniontown, it was Christmas, and it was artificially busy, so I decided to come back to see what it's like on a regular day.
By 1994, Crown had liquidated Hess's, putting an end to the 97-year run for the chain. Then on December 16, 1994, a fire destroyed nearly half of Crown's Logan Valley Mall. Crown American was on life support, and by March 1995, they had to take drastic steps to stay alive, so the CFO John Kriak decided to cut dividends by 43%. This caused the stock price to tank, all the way down to $6.50. Desperately grasping at straws, the company worked with the GE Capital to gain $100 million of acquisition financing, $110 million of straight debt to refinance 2 of their mortgages, and $50 million in working credit for renovations. This strategic alliance with the lender allowed Crown American to stay afloat and avoid collapsing, at least for the time being. It was a tense time for Crown American, and they struggled for years. On December 30th, 1997, it was announced that the former Hess space at Uniontown, which was occupied by freight liquidators at the time, would be converted to a call center named Teletech, who would spend over $5 million to renovate the space. We're looking directly at those renovations right now, and we're headed towards the Teletech, which used to be the Hess's. And at what looks like an anchor space down at the end there, that's an entranceway towards a small section of concourse that leads to the Teletech. And access to that small section has recently been cut off. But I can tell you that it looks exactly like the rest of the concourses with a big circular skylight. Teletech was open to its employees by February 1998. Then, by April 21st, 1999, poor old Frank Pasquarella died of a stroke in Johnstown, PA, after what I could only imagine were the most stressful years of his life. The man really was ahead of his time, and he had a brilliant vision for malls. To really drive that point home, I'd like to just share a quote from December 16th, 1990, that Mr. Pasquarella gave to reporters. Quote, "In the 1970s, the mall was exciting. They're not exciting anymore. I'd like to see a mall in the future that's not just shopping, but a mall with libraries, medical facilities, and offices. Make it one stop." Close quote. While Uniontown Mall was doing exceptionally well, Crown American Realty Trust would limp across that Y2K line, still trying desperately to stay afloat. But just a few years into the new millennium, they would decide to divest their interest in malls while still retaining their hotel business. On Monday, November 10th, 2003, it was announced that Crown American would sell off their entire 26 mall portfolio of over 17 million square feet of retail space to Pennsylvania Real Estate Investment Trust, or PREIT, for a $1.2 billion deal, essentially doubling their own retail footprint. The deal closed the following week. A few years later, parent company Retail Ventures was looking to unload their Value City chain amidst plummeting sales, and had been struggling to find a buyer for some time. Then on Wednesday, October 3rd, 2007, it was announced that Burlington Coat Factory would be purchasing up 24 Value City stores, of which the Uniontown Mall location was included. The former Value City was converted to a Burlington Coat Factory at Uniontown by the end of 2007. Up until the 2010s, Uniontown Mall had been doing super well. It was nearly fully occupied, both inline and anchored, but PREIT felt that it was time to unload the mall due to less than expected sales. Uniontown was underperforming, with sales of about $282 per square foot, against their portfolio average of over $418 per square foot. PREIT found a buyer in Great Neck, New York-based Namdar Realty Group and partner Mason Asset Management, who purchased the Uniontown Mall for $23 million on August 5th, 2015. Just a couple years after Namdar took over, the Sears had closed by March 31st, 2017. And 1 year later, after struggling through Chapter 11 turned Chapter 7 liquidation, all Bon-Ton stores were closed, including at Uniontown, on August 31st, 2018. To be fair though, these two losses were out of Namdar's control, and you really can't blame them for losing the anchors. However, 1 year after losing Bon-Ton, January 2019 brought the loss of Burlington Coat Factory, who chose not to renew their lease, along with the Dunham Sports and Timeless Traditions furniture store. This left the mall with just JCPenney and the movie theater as its main draw for customers. And by the end of 2019, Uniontown was hemorrhaging inline tenants, making long stretches of empty concourse. But something more nefarious than Namdar was just around the corner. Peering through the panels of 2019's closet was a sentient doll with lanky arms and legs, jet black hair, a button nose, freckles on its cheeks, piercing yellow eyes, and a ribbon around its neck. It stared as a family celebrated the Times Square ball drop on television, and just as the clock struck midnight, the doll stumbled out of the closet right in front of the family. Forgetting he had purchased a Tickle Me 2020 doll for his daughter, the dad thought the toy fell out of the closet, so he went to grab it so he could surprise his kid. She looked at the doll with hope, knowing it would bring her joy over the next year. She took it to school and shared it with her friends, and they all loved the yellow-eyed creature. But the girl, her family, and all of her friends would fall ill mysteriously. The doll would eke its way through the neighborhood to the next house, planting itself next to the trash can. The doll had been doing this for a while, and it picked up a friend along the way named Cuddle Me COVID. Each house the doll visited with its little friend brought weird sickness. This pattern would continue for 15 months, exponentially spreading as some families went without symptoms, unknowingly spreading their disease to others. 2020 was a rough year, and people began taking cover indoors, with businesses closing, livelihoods being ruined, and malls shuttering en masse.
Greetings and welcome to the Uniontown Mall. With so much turquoise, you might just blue yourself. My name is Thurston Charlemagne, and on behalf of Namdar, I do hope you enjoyed your visit, but I'm afraid the mall must take a short rest and close for the night, so we might entertain another day. Please get out at once and tell everyone that the mall is fully occupied. We need the money. Toodle-doo.
I first showed up to Uniontown in late 2020, and I was surprised to find it as busy and maskless as both you and I saw early in this film. And as the world began recovering and reopening, I made my way back out west to Cincinnati to film, and on my way home, I stopped here, resulting in the footage you just saw. I know I probably already have some comments from folks saying I misrepresented the occupancy here, since the mall was closing for the day as I got there, but I'm not in the business of hyperbole. The center concourse still has a good 25 to 35% of its tenants open, but their gates are just down for the day. However, in the surrounding wings and concourses, the mall is suffering. Locals do tell me that day to day, the mall is on an upswing, and I really do hope that's true, because this mall is gorgeous, and I would never want to see it permanently shuttered. I'd like to thank all of you for watching my video, especially if you took the time to hit the like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for all notifications. I'd also like to thank my patrons and elite explorers who contribute directly to me supporting my expeditions. Now that everything's beginning to really open back up, I'll be heading out on many huge excursions. Just recently, I made my way out west, and I had the opportunity to film over a dozen locations throughout Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, and Pennsylvania. So I hope you stick with me because I've got a ton of content to release. And while concerts are coming back and my day job is really busy, I'm constantly working to improve my content and to bring you all a high quality production. So if you're still with me by this point, even in this film, you may as well just subscribe because the content that I'm bringing in the future is awesome. I've been sitting on a lot of amazing stuff. If you haven't already, which most of you haven't, take a moment to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, where I do most of my posting between episodes, out on expedition, and through my day-to-day life. You can find me on both by my handle, @SalvatoreAmadeo. But if you'd like to chat with me directly, the easiest way to do so is through Discord. You can join the Dead Malls of Discord server free just by downloading the app, quickly making an account, and then clicking the invite link in the description of every one of my videos. Once you join, you'll get a message PM'd to you on how to get your role, and 99% of the server will be hidden until you get that role, so make sure to stop by the Moderator's Ears channel, ping a mod, and get rolled up. It's all super easy and free, so make sure to join. I'll be back soon with ExLog 91, where we visit the ultra-dead Mercury Vapor Wonderland Flea Market Dead Mall Menagerie just up the street, the Laurel Mall. But until then, please stay safe out there, take care of yourselves, and have a fantastic day.
Watch out! Greg didn't just see me, you almost ran me over.
And report it.